When the great chamber of the Galaxy Council opened above the silver world of Arkan, hundreds of alien delegates filled the vast ring of light and crystal, all waiting for the vote that would decide Earth's future, and far below them, behind a clear wall of glowing shields, the human delegation stood in silence as if they already knew what was coming. At the center of them was Ambassador Hannah, calm and straight-backed in her dark uniform, with Captain June beside her and military advisor. Admiral Sun standing just behind them like a stone wall, his face unreadable even as whispers moved through the chamber like poison, because every species in the galaxy had heard the same thing for months now, that humans were clever, fast, emotional, reckless, and too dangerous to be trusted with real military power. The High Speaker of the Council, a towering pale figure named Orin, raised one long hand and the room fell quiet. Then his voice rolled across the chamber as he announced the new interstellar security law, a law that would protect peace and stability by forbidding Earth from constructing warships, dreadnoughts, heavy cruisers, fleet carriers, or any vessel equipped for large-scale combat. And though the words sounded formal and clean, every human in the chamber heard the truth hiding beneath them. The galaxy did not want Earth to be strong. The delegates from older empires clicked their claws, flashed their teeth, or pulsed their strange skin colors in approval, and one of the loudest voices was Counselor Varek, who stood to speak with false politeness and said that humanity was too young among the stars, and too close to its violent past to be allowed such machines. And as he spoke, a wave of low laughter passed through the upper tiers when he mentioned old human wars, old Earth battles, old nuclear fire, and all the mistakes of a world that had once nearly destroyed itself. Hannah did not react, but June's hands tightened behind his back, and Admiral Sun's eyes narrowed just a little because he had seen this coming years before the council had even begun to say it out loud. When the vote ended, the law passed by a crushing margin, and Earth was left with only permission for cargo vessels, science ships, rescue ships, and light patrol craft with limited weapons, while the older powers kept their fleets, their orbital cannons, and their armadas that could burn whole moons. And when the session ended, the human delegation walked through a corridor of polished glass while alien envoys passed by with smiles that were not smiles at all. One reptilian diplomat leaned toward Hannah and said, almost kindly, that humans should be grateful the council had shown restraint, and another said Earth should focus on farming, trade, and civilized work instead of dreaming about war. But Hannah simply nodded, thanked them for their concern, and kept walking, because anger in that moment would have given the council exactly what it wanted. Later, aboard the quiet human diplomatic ship returning toward Seoul, June finally broke the silence in the command room and asked how Earth was expected to survive if the galaxy decided to turn on them, and Hannah looked out at the stars for a long time before she answered that the council had not passed a peace law that day, they had passed a cage. Admiral Sun, who had remained silent until then, stepped closer to the table and placed a small data key on its surface, and when it opened, it showed hidden files, sealed budgets, deep space maps, and names of projects that had never appeared in any public record, and that was the first time June saw the truth. Earth had already been preparing. Years earlier, when the first rumors of the ban had begun, a handful of leaders on Earth had quietly agreed that humanity could not trust the galaxy to protect them, and under civilian shipping programs, mining operations, and orbital infrastructure plans, they had begun building something far larger than anyone outside their circle understood. When the ship returned to Earth, June was taken not to a public base, but to a hidden launch site beneath the dark waters of the Pacific, where elevators the size of towers carried him down into a buried chamber of steel and white light, and there he saw engineers, workers, and officers moving in perfect silence beneath the skeleton of a vessel so massive that he could not see its full shape at first. Cranes moved along magnetic rails, welding arcs flashed like lightning, and rows of armored hull plates stood waiting like the scales of some sleeping beast, and beside him stood Director Mina, younger than he expected, sharp-eyed and calm, the woman now leading the secret design network of the project, and she told him in simple words that the council had banned warships on paper. But paper did not stop people who had already learned what it meant to be underestimated. She explained that Earth had split the project across many locations so no single spy or probe could understand the full picture. The deep ocean yards built pressure-resistant hull sections, the far side of the moon handled heavy reactor cores, asteroid mining colonies hollowed out rock to hide ship frames inside them, and civilian cargo rings in high orbit secretly produced weapon mounts disguised as industrial machinery, all while public Earth continued to smile, trade, and act as if it had accepted its place. June was led through the chamber and saw names painted in small letters on unfinished bulkheads. Crew names, not ship names, because Mina believed the ships would matter less than the people who would one day stand inside them. And he met Day, a young engineer with oil on his hands and dark circles under his eyes, who grinned like a man who had forgotten how to sleep and told him that alien warships were built for elegance, for rules, for old traditions, but human warships would be built for survival, with layered armor, hidden compartments, backup systems, brutal engines, and weapons that could still fire even after half the ship had been torn open. June asked if Earth could really hide something this large from the galaxy, and Admiral Sun answered that the galaxy did not understand humanity nearly as well as it believed, because the Council thought humans were loud, proud, and easy to provoke, but what they failed to see was the other side of human nature, the patient side, the wounded side, the side that smiled while building a storm in silence. Over the next months, June was brought into the inner circle and shown more than he ever imagined existed. Shipyards carved into dead asteroids drifting beyond normal traffic lanes, black construction docks hidden inside lunar shadow trenches, silent factories beneath Antarctic ice, and training stations were handpicked. Crews drilled in secret with old simulators, learning how to fight enemies who had never even imagined humans could strike back. He watched Mina shape battle plans around speed, deception, and endurance, watched Day argue over armor thickness and reactor shielding, watched Hannah negotiate trade deals in public while secretly moving resources across half the system, and watched Admiral Sun say almost nothing while somehow seeing every weakness before anyone else could name it. Outside, the galaxy continued its smug peace, and the Council sent observers to Earth now and then, each one leaving satisfied after touring harmless shipyards full of cargo haulers and research craft, never realizing that real construction happened far below them, far above them, and far beyond what their sensors were told to look for. Years did not pass in this first stage, but the foundation of those years was laid in that silence, and one night, after a false inspection team finally left orbit, June stood on a high platform inside the lunar cavern dock and looked out over the nearly completed hull of the first true human warship, its black frame stretching through the cavern like a mountain of iron, its unfinished guns covered by shielding tarps, its engines dormant but waiting. And for the first time he understood why the Council had been afraid long before humans ever touched the stars. Beside him, Hannah stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her face lit by welding sparks, and Mina read status reports while Day shouted at a crane operator across the chamber, and Admiral Sun slowly walked to the edge of the platform, looking down at the ship as if he were staring into the future itself. "They think they stopped us," June said quietly, and Sun gave the smallest shake of his head before answering in a voice so low it was almost swallowed by the hum of machines. "No, Captain. They only taught us to build where they could not see." Then warning lights flickered green across the cavern as the first reactor test began. Deep power rolled through the hull like distant thunder, and the giant vessel beneath them came alive one system at a time, not as a symbol, not as a protest, but as a promise. And while the Galaxy Council celebrated the law that had chained Earth, humanity took its first real step into the darkness with steel in its hands, fire in its engines, and a secret fleet beginning to rise where no one in the galaxy would ever expect it. Years passed after the first hidden warship awakened beneath the moon, and while the Galaxy Council looked toward richer systems and older rivalries, believing Earth had accepted its place as a weak and obedient world, humanity moved in silence with a patience the stars had never expected from them, and across Earth, across Luna, across the dark belts of drifting stone beyond Mars, thousands of hands worked day and night under false names, false schedules, and false shipping logs, building not just ships but an entire future that the galaxy would one day fear. Captain June was no longer simply an officer brought into a secret, because now he had become one of the core leaders of the hidden defense plan, moving from one covert yard to another, inspecting crews, reviewing training records, and learning the full size of what Director Hannah, Commander Yuna, Engineer Day, and Admiral Sun had created together, and every new station he visited made the truth heavier in his chest, because what had begun as a desperate answer to the Council's insult had grown into something far larger than even he had imagined in those first days beneath the ocean. On the public side of history, Earth looked peaceful and productive. Its civilian fleets carried medicine, food, metals, and research teams to new colonies. Its diplomats smiled in council chambers, its trade ships docked politely at alien stations, and its people appeared to be following every law placed upon them. But in the dark spaces between official routes, Entire asteroids had been hollowed into secret construction vaults where great black hulls hung in magnetic fields like sleeping giants, while on the far side of the moon, shielded by rock and false geological noise, rows of heavy cruisers waited in shadow with their engines sealed and their guns hidden beneath industrial plating, and even beneath the ice of Antarctica, ancient caverns had been turned into deep command bunkers linked by quantum relays to shipyards scattered across the system. Commander Yuna, calm and sharp-minded, had become the brain of the hidden fleet, and while alien admirals still fought by tradition, by rank, and by rules written thousands of years ago, she built human doctrine around speed, surprise, sacrifice, and adaptation, teaching every captain that a human ship should never fight the battle the enemy expected. And in vast sealed simulators beneath Seoul, Busan, Nairobi, Toronto, and Orbital stations above Earth, crews trained again and again against impossible odds, learning how to use decoys, false retreats, crossfire traps, missile storms, drone walls, and close-range kinetic strikes that would tear through shields designed to stop energy weapons but not dense metal slugs hurled at brutal speed. June watched new officers rise through the secret ranks, men and women like Tae, Su, Nari, Jiho, Bora, and Hyun, simple people from ordinary cities and colonies who had joined under harmless military transfers or engineering programs, never knowing at first that they were stepping into the most guarded secret in human history. And he saw something that gave him more confidence than all the ships and weapons combined, because these people did not train with pride alone, they trained with memory, with the quiet understanding that if they failed, Earth would not get a second chance. Engineer Day became almost a legend inside the hidden program, moving between shipyards with his sleeves rolled up, his hair a mess, and his hands always stained by metal dust or coolant grease, arguing with teams over armor angles, blast shutters, and reactor redundancy. And he never designed human warships to look noble the way alien ships did, because he said beauty meant nothing in vacuum. If a ship died after one good hit, so his vessels were layered, ugly in a powerful way, dense with backup lines, armored bulkheads, emergency seals, shield boosters, internal rail tracks for drone reloads, and hidden reserve reactors that could wake a dying ship for one final charge, and the result was something terrifying even to the humans who built them. Destroyers shaped like blades, carriers built like floating fortresses, stealth frigates wrapped in signal-dampening skin, and the largest of all, the Titan-class warships, massive black mountains of metal with spinal railguns and deep-core reactors that could power whole cities. One of those Titans, still incomplete in the beginning, now stood nearly finished inside a cavern dock beneath Luna, and when June first walked its main spine with Yuna and Day, he felt like he was inside the bones of a future battle already waiting to happen, because every corridor, every armored blast door, every drone bay and command bridge had been designed with the same thought in mind. Survive the first hit, then hit back harder. Even Earth's orbital defenses had changed under the mask of civilian expansion, as old communications arrays secretly hid targeting systems, research satellites concealed missile racks, cargo depots carried modular defense pods, and entire rings of industrial platforms around key worlds were built so they could unfold in hours into interlocking kill zones if war ever came, and Admiral Sun oversaw it all with a patience that frightened even the people who admired him, because he never allowed excitement to become carelessness, and whenever someone called the growing armada enough, he would simply ask what happened if the Council sent 3 fleets instead of 1, or if an ally of the Council struck from behind, or if spies found half the yards before the first shot was fired, and after every hard question, more work followed. There were dangers, of course, because secrets that large always attract shadows, and one year, a Council inspection probe entered the Outer Mining Routes Near series after a false customs complaint, drifting too close to an asteroid that held 3 unfinished cruisers and 2 munitions vaults, and alarms spread through the hidden network in seconds, forcing June to take command of a covert interception team aboard a disguised salvage vessel, while Yuna cut traffic feeds and Day ordered emergency power down across the yard. And the tension of those hours pressed like iron against every heartbeat as the alien probe moved slowly, methodically, one scan at a time, until June's crew reached it in silence and deployed a microburst jammer that blinded its transmitters just long enough for a maintenance drone disguised as space debris to slam into its sensor core, sending it spinning dead into the dark. The official report later claimed a radiation fault caused the probe's loss, and the Council accepted the explanation because their arrogance remained stronger than their suspicion. But after that day, security doubled, access narrowed, and even trusted officers learned only the parts of the fleet they needed to know. because Hannah understood that one mistake could bury all of humanity beneath the same smiling lies the Council had used from the start. While the hidden fleet grew, so did Earth itself, and that may have been the greatest change of all, because old divisions that once defined nations and blocks slowly weakened under the long pressure of a shared future, not because humanity became perfect, but because fear gave them focus, and the idea that the galaxy would always see them as lesser pushed people to build together in ways no one had thought possible before, with ship steel from one continent, reactors from another, AI systems from lunar labs, medical support from orbital stations, and pilots from colonies born under foreign skies, all of them tied to one silent purpose that no public speech ever named. Sometimes June would stand in the observation galleries of the hidden yards and watch workers end a shift, tired and quiet, some of them laughing, some carrying lunch tins, some leaning on each other after 14-hour rotations, and he would think how strange it was that the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy was not being born from hatred alone but from stubborn love. Love of Earth, of home, of family, of the simple right to stand unchained under the stars. Still, the galaxy did not stop reminding humanity of its place. Because in council sessions, Earth's requests for equal security access were denied, human patrol routes were limited, colonial disputes were always settled against them, and alien commentators spoke openly about how lucky humans were to be guided by wiser species, and each insult only hardened the quiet resolve inside the secret command rooms below Earth and Luna. One evening, years into the project, June was called to a sealed strategy hall beneath the Antarctic ice where Hannah, Una, Day, and Admiral Sun stood around a wide tactical map glowing with stars and hidden ship markers, and for the first time, June saw the full count of what humanity had built so far. Dozens of stealth frigates, scores of destroyers, lines of cruisers, heavy carriers, defense stations, mine layers, drone tenders, and 7 Titan-class warships either completed or nearing final activation, and the scale of it stole even his breath, because this was no longer a plan for survival alone, it was a war fleet, vast enough to challenge powers that had ruled space for centuries. Hannah spoke softly then, saying that the fleet had crossed a line from secret hope to real power, and Una added that the crews were nearly ready, but Admiral Sun's face remained hard as stone, because he believed the Council's fear would grow before the fleet was fully complete, and he warned that every success in trade, every new human colony, every small rise in Earth's influence would only make the old empires more nervous, and nervous empires often chose violence before reason. As if the stars themselves wanted to prove him right, an alert suddenly flashed across the chamber from the outer belt, a coded signal from a silent watcher station near one of the hidden asteroid yards, and when June opened the feed, he saw the cold shape of an unmarked Council intelligence probe drifting through the rocks, smaller than a warship, but far more dangerous in that moment, because it was not following trade lanes or inspection routes, it was searching, and in the long silence that followed, Una's eyes sharpened, Day swore under his breath. Hannah straightened like someone hearing the first distant sound of thunder, and Admiral Sun placed both hands on the table before saying the words that made every heartbeat in the room turn heavy. They are starting to look, and out in the dark beyond Mars, inside an asteroid the galaxy believed was empty stone, hidden reactors dimmed, workers froze at their stations, weapon systems went cold, and the silent fleet of Earth held its breath in the black, waiting to see if the next moment would remain secret, or become the first step toward war. The silent years that had protected Earth began to crack the moment the unmarked Council probe drifted too close to the hidden asteroid yard. And although Captain June's interception team managed to blind it and send its broken shell tumbling into the dark before it could transmit anything useful, everyone inside Earth's secret command network understood that something had changed, because the Galaxy Council was no longer watching from a distance with lazy pride. It was now starting to search, with purpose, and in the frozen command hall beneath Antarctica, where blue tactical lights painted cold lines across the faces of Director Hannah, Commander Una, Engineer Day, Admiral Sun, and June himself, the air felt heavier than it had in years. The official explanation sent to the Council claimed the lost probe had suffered a radiation failure near unstable mining debris, and publicly the Council accepted it with the same board superiority it always used when dealing with humans. But, privately, in the bright upper chambers of the Council world Arkan, Councillor Varek was no longer smiling, because Earth had become too successful, too stable, and too useful to the wider galaxy for his comfort, and the old powers around him had started whispering the same thing in different ways, that humans were still too quiet, too disciplined, and too ambitious for a species that was supposed to remain harmless. Trade reports showed Earth gaining influence across border colonies. Human engineers were being requested on stations far from Sol. Human medical ships were becoming trusted in crisis zones, and small independent systems that had once ignored Earth were now signing agreements with them, not because humanity held military power in the open, but because they worked harder, adapted faster, and did not forget insult, and that frightened Varric more than any visible fleet could have. Inside the council chamber, he began shaping that fear into policy, speaking often of regional imbalance, unmonitored human expansion, and cultural volatility, using smooth political language to hide what he truly wanted, which was a final move before Earth became impossible to control. And while many delegates still saw humanity as weak, Varric pushed them toward suspicion by presenting carefully selected incidents: human traders arguing at border ports, minor colonial disputes, old historical footage of Earth wars, and exaggerated reports of human private security vessels escorting convoys too aggressively, each example small by itself but powerful when repeated often enough, until even neutral voices began to ask whether the species once banned from building warships might be finding other ways to grow dangerous. Back in Sol, Hannah understood exactly what that shift meant, because she had spent years reading the moods behind council words, and she told the others that Varric was preparing the galaxy emotionally before he moved politically, which meant the next step would not be debate but pressure. Admiral Sun agreed at once and ordered all hidden yards into elevated caution, reducing travel between secret sites, changing encryption patterns, and dividing fleet command nodes so that no single strike or spy could cripple the whole network, while Commander Yuna accelerated battle drills so intensely that even veteran crews began ending their shifts with shaking hands and bloodshot eyes, because she knew the first hours of any real war would decide whether the hidden fleet became legend or graveyard. June spent those weeks moving constantly between the shadow yards of Luna, the deep vaults beneath the Pacific, and the hidden stations beyond Mars, inspecting crews and memorizing the faces of officers who might soon be asked to die for a war the galaxy still believed could never happen. And everywhere he went he saw the same thing. Fear, yes, but also readiness, because the people inside the secret program had lived too long under the weight of waiting, and many of them had stopped fearing war as much as they feared never being ready when it came. Then the spark arrived, just as Hannah predicted, and it came not at Earth itself but at a small human colony convoy traveling near the border lanes of the Coral Reach, where 3 transport ships carrying families, mining equipment, and medicine were ambushed in open space by fast attack craft using masked signals, and by the time civilian escorts could respond, 1 transport had been torn open, another left crippled and burning, and dozens of colonists were dead, including children, engineers, and relief workers whose only crime had been flying under the human flag. The attack sent shock through Earth, but the deeper shock came hours later when the Council released its first official statement, because instead of condemning the unknown attackers, the Council accused the convoy of aggressive route violation, and claimed the incident proved that human expansion was creating instability in fragile sectors, and Varric himself stood before the chamber to argue that Earth's growing reach was provoking conflict the galaxy could not afford, turning the blood of innocent colonists into a weapon against the very people who had lost them. June watched the broadcast from a secure room on Luna, his jaw tight as the names of the dead scrolled beneath Varric's cold speech, and beside him Yuna said nothing for a long time before quietly asking Day to reroute 2 hidden sensor arrays to the Coral Reach wreckage because she no longer believed anything the Council called an accident. What they found over the next 3 days changed everything, as human covert drones recovered fragments of weapons signatures, flight vectors, and burst transmissions that did not match pirates or raiders at all, but pointed instead toward Council-manufactured attack systems scrubbed of official marks, and though the evidence was incomplete, it was enough for Hannah and Sun to see the truth clearly. The ambush had been staged or supported to create a reason for escalation, a manufactured wound meant to make Earth look like the problem before the knife went in deeper. Then came the ultimatum, delivered with ceremonial language and smiling cruelty, a formal Council demand that Earth submit to a temporary stabilization protocol in response to the Coral Reach crisis, which meant allowing Council military inspection fleets into Sol, dismantling or surrendering major orbital defense networks, opening all colonies to outside oversight, freezing further human expansion beyond approved zones, and accepting permanent Council observers within Earth's military command structure. A list so extreme that even some human civilians who saw only the public version understood it was not security but occupation. On Earth, people filled streets in silence or anger, some waving flags, some holding images of the dead from Coral Reach, while on the public channels Hannah addressed the world with measured calm, saying Earth sought peace, valued law, and would review the Council's demands carefully, and to the galaxy it looked like the same old restrained human response, the same careful diplomacy, the same nervous species afraid to challenge powers older and larger than itself, but beneath the calm surface, hidden command channels lit up across the system like a storm. In the Antarctic bunker, Hannah ended the public transmission and turned from the camera to face the real war table, where June, Yuna, Day, and Admiral Sun waited with grim eyes, and there was no softness left in her voice when she said the Council had chosen its path. Admiral Sun answered by opening a sealed command archive that only 3 people on Earth had ever seen in full, revealing activation trees for the entire hidden fleet, fallback routes, reserve positions, and the final authority codes that would turn decades of silence into motion. And even June, who had already seen the scale of the fleet, felt his heartbeat change when he realized how close they now stood to the edge. Yet Sun did not order immediate full activation because he believed the Council wanted panic, wanted a rash response they could call proof of human aggression. So instead he chose one last mask, instructing Earth to appear divided, fearful, and slow, while secret preparations moved beneath that illusion at maximum speed. Over the next days, civilian news showed protests, emergency debates, and worried commentators asking whether Earth should surrender some demands to avoid war, and alien networks mocked humanity's uncertainty, saying the species was finally learning its place, while at the same time hidden docks opened in silence, crews were recalled under false civilian orders, ammunition moved through cargo lanes disguised as industrial freight, stealth frigates slipped into outer patrol shadows, and Titan-class reactors were warmed from cold sleep one stage at a time. June took command of rapid deployment groups stationed between Luna and Mars, meeting with officers like Tae, Bora, Nari, Hyun, and Jiho, each one carrying calm faces over nerves of steel, and he told them only what they needed to know. If the order came, they would not be fighting for revenge alone. They would be fighting so Earth would never kneel again. Commander Yuna moved like a blade through the command web, placing drone nets near likely jump points, hiding reserve squadrons behind debris fields, and mapping kill zones where alien formations would naturally compress if they entered Sol in confidence, because she understood the enemy would come proud, ordered, and certain of human weakness, and that certainty itself would become the first weapon used against them. Then, as if the stars had been holding their breath for this exact moment, the long-range watchers in the outer dark detected a surge at the edge of the system. Multiple warp signatures, then dozens, then hundreds, then so many that the tactical displays began filling with red markers faster than operators could count them, and the data resolved into the shape of a massive Council battle group led by Marshal Tyron, a hard-faced fleet commander known for crushing smaller systems without mercy, bringing cruisers, carriers, destroyer wings, orbital assault ships, and enforcement barges under the legal excuse of stabilization. Though every officer in the hidden network knew it was an invasion in all but name, public channels across the galaxy showed the approaching fleet and spoke of lawful order being restored, while in human homes across Earth people stared upward at a sky that still looked peaceful, not knowing how close death had come, and in the secret vault beneath Luna, June stood on the bridge of a darkened command ship as low power hummed through armored decks, his hands resting on a console that had never yet seen true battle, while outside the hidden docks thousands of sealed hulls waited in shadow like predators beneath deep water. The Council fleet crossed the outer line of Sol and issued its final command to Earth. Stand down, open orbital lanes, accept inspection, or be treated as a hostile force, and on the surface of the world, silence answered them, a silence the Council read as fear, but in the deepest hidden layers of Earth's defense grid, encrypted codes began to move all at once, jumping from ice bunkers to lunar caverns, from asteroid vaults to ocean platforms, from dead satellites to sleeping titans, and Commander Yuna's voice entered every sealed bridge and hidden barracks in the network with perfect calm as reactor cores brightened and blast doors unlocked. And when she gave the order, it was so simple that it almost sounded gentle, yet every human who heard it knew history had just changed forever. Open the vaults, bring the fleet online. As Commander Yuna's order raced through the hidden defense network of Sol, the silence that had protected Earth for decades finally broke apart, and across the system, machines that had slept in darkness began to wake with a power so vast that even the stars seemed to notice. Deep beneath the Pacific, Armored launch gates split open as columns of seawater exploded upward and enormous black warships rose from hidden ocean cradles on anti-grav lifts, their hulls shedding sheets of water like sea monsters climbing into the light, while on the far side of the moon, ancient caverns sealed behind false rock faces cracked wide and released lines of cruisers and destroyers from shadow docks, their engines burning cold blue as they slipped into vacuum, and far beyond Mars, dead asteroids that the Galaxy Council had ignored for years suddenly split apart along hidden seams, revealing silent ship vaults packed with carriers, stealth frigates, drone tenders, and Titan-class hulls so massive they blotted out the stars around them. On the bridge of his command ship, Captain June felt the deck tremble under his boots as power surged into systems that had never yet fired in war, and one by one, status lights turned from dark to gold across the wide tactical wall, showing green confirmations from fleet groups he had once only seen on secret maps. Luna Spear Group, Pacific Shield Wing, Black Belt Reserve, South Orbital Net, Outer Soul Hunter Screen, and with each name that came alive, the shape of Earth's answer became clearer. On the surface of Earth, people looked up in shock as ordinary communications platforms unfolded into weapon grids, as industrial stations in orbit rotated open to reveal missile racks and railgun spines, as cargo rings around Luna lit with sudden purpose, and as countless civilian channels cut to static under emergency override, replaced by a single comm broadcast from Director Hannah, who appeared against a dark background and told every human on Earth, Luna, and the colonies that the Council had come not for peace but for surrender, and that from this moment on, humanity would defend itself. In the outer reaches of Sol, the invading Council fleet under Marshal Tyron continued its approach in perfect formation, still certain that Earth would break, still believing the system held only light patrol craft and scattered orbital defenses, and the first seconds of true confusion hit them when long-range scans began returning impossible readings from every direction at once, hidden mass signatures blooming where empty space should have been, reactor wakes appearing from lunar shadow, asteroid fields, and low planetary orbits, until the tactical screens on Tyron's flagship filled with so many sudden contacts that his sensor crews thought they were under electronic attack. Then the images sharpened and the truth became visible. Earth had not built a few illegal defense ships, it had built an entire war fleet in secret, and not just a fleet, but a machine of war spread across the whole system, layered, hidden, and ready. Tyron's jaw tightened as the first visual feeds came in, showing black human destroyers in tight wedge formations, heavy cruisers moving in shield-linked walls, carriers releasing clouds of attack drones that spread like dark storms, and behind them all, emerging slowly from the shadow of Luna like moving mountains, the Titan-class warships, each one longer than the Council's own battle carriers, their armor dark and thick, their spinal railguns glowing as power fed into them for the first time. On the bridge of the lead Titan, the unbroken dawn, Admiral Sun stood with his hands behind his back, face hard as iron, while crew stations around him pulsed with life, and beside him Commander Yuna directed fleet movements through dozens of layered command channels, turning what looked like chaos to the enemy into perfect human design, because every hidden yard, every false station, every orbital platform had been placed for this exact moment. June received his attack path from Yuna and drove his command ship forward with the first strike group, flanked by fast destroyers under Tae and Hyun, missile frigates under Bora, and drone support led by Nari, all of them accelerating from Luna's shadow toward the incoming Council vanguard. And though his heart pounded, his voice remained calm as he ordered all ships to hold fire until the enemy crossed the designated line. Tyron, furious but still proud, assumed the human reveal was a bluff built around unfinished ships and panic tactics, so he gave the command for immediate suppression, sending forward his first attack wings, sleek alien interceptors, fast destroyer screens, and shield cruisers built to crush lesser systems with overwhelming energy fire. And for a few seconds the stars between the fleets became a river of light as plasma lances and beam cannons flashed toward the human front. But Earth had spent decades preparing for exactly the kind of attack older powers always used, and June's ships did not charge into the beams as Tyron expected. Instead they rolled into layered defense patterns, armor angled, drone screens blooming outward, decoy signatures multiplying, and the first human losses were far lighter than the Council had calculated, because many of the hits struck false targets, armored sacrificial drones, or shield-linked outer hulls designed to absorb punishment. Then June gave the order to return fire, and the war truly began. The human line answered not with elegant energy beams but with brutal force. Missile bays opened in waves, releasing swarms so dense they turned space into a moving wall of metal and fire. Railguns cracked with terrifying power as dense slugs punched across vacuum at speeds that made shield timing fail, and hidden flanking frigates that had gone dark behind debris fields suddenly struck from the sides, forcing the Council vanguard to split formation under pressure. Tyron watched in disbelief as his forward destroyer wing vanished in a chain of explosions, not because it had been outnumbered, but because it had been led exactly where Yuna wanted it, into a crossing zone between Luna-based rail platforms and June's advancing line, and before the surviving alien ships could adjust, Bora's missile frigates dumped a second wave directly into their exposed gaps, shredding engines, shield nodes, and command bridges. Across the battlefield, the shock only grew, because every time the Council thought it had found the human center, another hidden layer opened. Cargo stations unfolded into gun nests. Asteroid fragments erupted with mine clouds, dormant satellites lit with targeting lasers, and carrier groups that had been invisible minutes before released thousands of attack drones that flooded enemy sensor systems and cut apart smaller craft at close range. Day, working from a buried engineering command beneath Luna, watched damage feeds pour in from the front and shouted updates as emergency armor locks, reserve reactor loops, and self-sealing hull systems activated exactly as designed, saving human ships that should have died under normal fleet doctrine. And for the first time, the engineers who had built in darkness saw their creations survive real battle, not because they were beautiful, but because they were stubborn, layered, and made by people who had assumed every system would fail at the worst moment and planned for it anyway. The Council's first assault collapsed faster than anyone on their side could understand, their proud formations breaking under constant crossfire, their communication relays jammed by human drone clouds, their shield harmonics thrown off by the sheer violence of repeated kinetic strikes. And in the middle of it all, June drove his ship deeper into the fight with a focus so sharp it felt cold, guiding Tay's destroyers through a gap in the alien line and cutting down a heavy cruiser at near point-blank range before rolling clear as Hyun's wings slammed into the exposed flank, while above them the Unbroken Dawn fired its spinal railgun for the first time. The shot so powerful that it crossed the battlefield like a line drawn by a god and tore straight through a Council carrier and the destroyer behind it, leaving both ships breaking apart in silent fire. Panic spread through the invading fleet, and the impossible truth began to reach even the farthest command decks. Earth had not been weak, Earth had been waiting. Marshal Tyron, now sweating despite his species' cold blood, tried to stabilize the battle by pulling back his center and calling in reserve assault groups. But Yuna had predicted that move as well, and the moment his formation shifted, hidden human cruisers from the Black Belt Reserve emerged from the shadow of a shattered asteroid cluster and struck his rear command escorts, isolating his flagship from parts of its support line. Across Seoul, human civilians watched the battle through filtered emergency feeds, seeing only flashes, warnings, and the shape of black warships moving against the stars. And for the first time in living memory, the people of Earth understood that the impossible stories whispered for years in rumors and conspiracy were true. Humanity had built warships, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, and they were fighting now not for conquest but because the galaxy had finally pushed too far. Still, victory did not come without cost, because even as the Council vanguard broke, human ships burned as well, destroyers vanished under concentrated beam fire, a Luna defense platform went dark after taking a direct carrier strike, and June watched one of Nari's drone tenders erupt into debris after staying too long to protect a damaged cruiser. But unlike the enemy, the human line did not panic at losses. It tightened, adapted, and hit back harder, each sacrifice feeding the machine instead of breaking it. At last Tyron was forced to order a retreat from the inner kill zone, his remaining forward wings falling back in disorder, and for one breathless moment it looked as if the first invasion wave might collapse completely. But then new alarms lit across Yuna's board, and the calm in her eyes sharpened into something darker as long-range watchers beyond the main battle line detected fresh warp tiers opening at the edge of the system. Bigger than before, deeper, more numerous, and not part of the first assault plan. On every human bridge, incoming signatures multiplied again, and as the tactical image widened, June felt his stomach turn cold, because emerging from those new tiers was a second Council force hidden behind the first. A massive reserve armada of elite warships, heavier, older, and deadlier than Tyron's main group, led by a colossal command vessel wrapped in forbidden armor and carrying weapon signatures that no public Council fleet was supposed to possess. proof that the so-called peacekeepers had come ready to erase Earth from the start. On the bridge of the unbroken dawn, the golden light of the first battle still flickered across Admiral Sun's face as he looked at the new red tide pouring into Sol, and though human crews across the system had just won the fight the galaxy said they could never survive, the old Admiral's voice carried no triumph when he spoke over fleet-wide command. Only the hard truth that every heart already felt: hold formation. The first battle is over. The real war begins now. The shock of the first battle had barely faded when the Second Council Armada tore into Sol like a dark storm, and every human who saw the tactical display understood at once that the enemy had never come to inspect, never come to negotiate, and never come to restore peace, because the fleet now entering the system was not a lawful enforcement force but a hidden execution blade meant to wipe Earth from the stars forever. Massive elite warships poured from the fresh warp tiers beyond Mars. Their hulls heavier than Tyron's front line, their shields stronger, their formations tighter, and at the center of them moved a giant command vessel so huge that even the Titan-class ships seemed smaller against it, a black and silver fortress known in old Council records as the Dominion Spear, a ship from a class the Council had publicly banned centuries earlier, and when Commander Yuna saw its weapons profile, she knew the truth before anyone said it aloud. The Council had accused humans of danger, while secretly keeping its own forbidden monsters hidden in the dark. On the bridge of the unbroken dawn, Admiral Sun stood unmoving as the new red markers spread across the display, while Captain June, still surrounded by damage alarms from the first battle, felt the deck shake beneath his boots as repair crews fought fires and sealed torn compartments, and across the system, human ships that had just survived the impossible now had to turn and face something worse. The Council's reserve fleet did not waste time with speeches, because the mask had fallen completely, and within seconds, long-range heavy beams cut across the black between the stars, slamming into the outer human screen with a force that turned one damaged destroyer into a cloud of metal and white fire, while missile storms followed behind them, thicker and faster than anything Tyron's first wave had launched, forcing Earth's fleet to scatter into emergency defense patterns before the new assault could break their line. In one crushing blow, "Shift to second lattice," Yuna ordered, her voice still calm even as warning tones filled every channel, and all across the human fleet, ships that looked wounded or out of position suddenly moved with hidden purpose, because Yuna had built reserve patterns inside reserve patterns, fallback traps inside fallback traps, and now the second layer of Earth's secret war doctrine opened like a blade. Damaged ships pulled inward toward shield-linked Titan cover, stealth frigates vanished into cold drift paths, drone carriers split wide to seed false signatures, and mine layers hidden in the wreckage of the first battle armed themselves in silence, turning broken metal and drifting debris into a trap field the Council could not yet see. Marshal Tyron, his pride shattered by the first defeat, tried to rejoin the fight from the rear, but his battered surviving ships were shoved aside by the arrival of the true Council strike force, and aboard the Dominion Spear, High Commander Reth, a brutal veteran chosen by Varric for one purpose only, took direct control and ordered full annihilation of all resistance in Sol, with Earth itself marked as a final target if the fleet line collapsed. On Earth, millions watched emergency feeds in fear and silence, seeing flashes above the sky, hearing civil defense warnings, and learning in one terrible hour that the galaxy they had tried to join had come not to judge them but to erase them. Yet instead of panic breaking the world apart, something older and deeper spread through cities, colonies, and stations alike. A cold unity forged over decades of insult, and people moved with purpose. Medics to shelters, engineers to backup grids, workers to orbital support, families into hardened tunnels. Because somewhere deep inside, humanity had been waiting for this day even if most had never known it. June took his strike group into the second battle with half the ships he had started with, Tay's destroyers scarred and low. On missiles, Bora's frigates running hot, Hyun wounded but still at his station, and Nari's remaining drone wings spread thin. But none of them asked to fall back, because they all knew the reserve armada was aiming for the gap between Luna and Earth, the one corridor that would let them burn straight toward the homeworld if it opened, and June's orders were simple. Hold that line, no matter the cost. The battle that followed was more savage than the first, because the Council had learned to fear human tricks and now came forward with brutal discipline. Their heavy cruisers advancing under overlapping shield walls, their fighter screens sweeping ahead to clear mines and drones, their carriers launching suppression swarms designed to overload human point defense, and for a while, The sheer weight of the attack pushed Earth's line backward, 1 kilometer at a time through vacuum. As rail platforms exploded, 2 hidden stations went dark, and a cruiser under Bora's command lost power, after taking a direct spine hit that cracked its armor from bow to stern. Day, buried in the engineering command below Luna, drove his teams like a man possessed, rerouting power through backup relays, forcing reserve reactors online, pushing damaged ships to survive minutes longer than any safe system should allow, and when one Titan's shield grid failed, he manually triggered internal armor collapse zones that saved its core at the cost of half its outer hull, a brutal choice that kept the giant ship alive and firing. Then Yuna's deeper trap closed, because while the Council Reserve Fleet focused on breaking Earth's center, stealth frigates that had vanished earlier under cold drift signatures reappeared behind them near the outer engagement zone, and at Yuna's command, they lit off hidden transmitters that activated the minefield seated inside the debris of Tyron's ruined first wave, turning what looked like harmless wreckage into a sudden wall of explosions beneath the Council's rear formations, crippling escorts, cutting supply links, and forcing enemy carriers to turn broadside at the worst possible moment. Now? Yuna said, and June answered with everything he had left, driving his command ship and Tay's surviving destroyers straight into the opening, while Bora dumped her last full missile reserve into the exposed carrier line. Hyun's gunships raking the wounded flanks at close range, and from Luna's shadow the Unbroken Dawn and the other Titans unleashed synchronized spinal railgun fire that crossed the battlefield like judgment, tearing through 3 heavy cruisers, punching into the side of a carrier, and shattering a shield command node that had been anchoring the Council center. Still the Dominion spear kept coming, and that giant ship became the heart of the war, its armor shrugging off hits that would have killed smaller vessels, its heavy beams slicing holes through human formations, its command system stabilizing the collapsing Council line again and again, and Admiral Sun understood before anyone said it that as long as that monster lived, the reserve armada would keep fighting hard enough to threaten Earth itself. On the bridge of the Unbroken Dawn, he made the decision that every great commander eventually faces, the one between survival and victory, and without raising his voice, he ordered the fleet to prepare a decoy collapse on the left wing, while he took the flagship forward on an intercept course directly toward the Dominion spear. June heard the order and immediately protested over command channel, because he knew what it meant, but Sun cut him off with a steady calm that felt heavier than shouting, telling him that the younger officers had been trained for this moment, that Earth's future no longer depended on one old admiral, and that someone had to open the enemy's throat. Hannah, listening from the Antarctic command hall, closed her eyes for one brief second before approving the maneuver, because she also knew there was no other path. As the human left flank appeared to weaken under planned withdrawal, the Dominion spear committed forward to finish the break, exactly as Yuna hoped, and when it crossed the hidden line, every remaining human asset in range shifted at once, drawing the giant ship deeper into a narrowing funnel between drifting wreckage, shattered stations, and 2 damaged Titans that had been holding back under silent orders. Then the Unbroken Dawn surged ahead alone, engines screaming far beyond safe limits as Day flooded its core with dangerous reserve power, its hull already burning under incoming fire, its forward armor peeling away in sheets, but still Admiral Sun stood straight on the bridge and drove the ship forward through beam strikes and missile blasts until the flagship was close enough for the impossible. The Unbroken Dawn fired its spinal railgun at near point-blank range, the shot punching through the Dominion spear's outer shields and ripping a burning trench across its side, not enough to kill it, but enough to crack open the armor around its main reactor spine, and in that same instant Sun gave his final command, ordering all hands to abandon if they could while locking the ship's core into irreversible overload. June screamed for him to pull away, Yuna's hands clenched white over her console. Hannah stood frozen in silence, and Day nearly tore the controls apart trying to find another option. But there was none, and the old admiral's last words reached the fleet in a calm voice that every human would remember for generations. "Tell Earth we were ready." Then the Unbroken Dawn rammed the Dominion spear like a falling star, its overloaded core detonating inside the wound its own railgun had made, and for one blinding moment the center of the battlefield vanished into white fire, so bright that every sensor across Seoul went blind, and when the light finally collapsed, the Dominion spear was breaking apart in huge burning sections, its command decks gone, its reactor chain failing, its great body twisting into ruin as the Council Reserve Fleet lost its anchor in a single impossible blow. What followed was not a clean victory but a storm of rage and resolve, because every human ship still alive surged forward at once. Not in disorder but in perfect, terrible unity, as if Sun's death had turned the whole fleet into one weapon, and June led the charge through the shattered center. His command ship scarred and bleeding atmosphere. Tay's last destroyer at his side. Bora firing rail bursts from a half-dead frigate. Hyun limping in with gunships that should have been scrap. Nari's surviving drones swarming like knives through enemy engines and bridges, while Yuna coordinated the final encirclement from every remaining command channel, tightening the noose around a council fleet that was suddenly leaderless, damaged, and afraid. One by one, the elite enemy ships died, some to railgun strikes, some to missile floods, some to close-range boarding detonations, and some simply broke and tried to flee, only to find the outer Soul Hunter screen waiting for them in the dark. At the same time, Hannah released the hidden evidence Earth had gathered, the weapon traces from the colony convoy attack, the sealed council directives, the illegal deployment records, and fragments recovered from the Dominion Spear itself proving the strike had been planned long before the so-called inspection. And she broadcasted across every open network in the galaxy, to neutral systems, trade unions, border colonies, and even the public channels on Arkin. And suddenly the council's lie cracked wider than any ship hull, because worlds that had trusted the old order now saw what it truly was: fear hiding behind law, power hiding behind peace. On Arkin, Councillor Varek tried to call for total mobilization, but the chamber turned against him as delegates shouted, withdrew support or cut links entirely, and the old unity of the council began to break in real time. Back in Seoul, the last organized resistance ended when Marshal Tyron, trying to escape in shame, was trapped by June's strike group and forced to surrender after his engines were cut out beneath him, and as the remaining enemy ships either fled or powered down, a strange quiet spread over the battlefield, broken only by static, damage calls, and the drifting fire of thousands of dead machines. Earth had survived, but the cost hung heavy in every channel. Ships gone, stations broken, cities shaken, and Admiral Sun lost with the flagship that had carried humanity's final answer into the heart of the enemy. In the hours that followed, rescue craft filled the void. Civilians on Earth stepped out beneath a sky that was scarred but still theirs. And Hannah stood before a live broadcast to the galaxy with June and Yuna beside her, their faces tired, burned, and unbowed, and she spoke not as a conqueror but as a witness, saying that humanity had never wanted war, that Earth had obeyed insult after insult while others armed themselves in secret, that humans had built their fleet not to rule the galaxy but to make sure no one would ever decide their fate again, and that peace without strength was only another name for surrender. Across the stars, species that had once laughed at Earth now watched in silence because the young world they had tried to chain had faced the oldest powers in the galaxy, endured betrayal, survived the attack, and broken the hand that struck it,